Hey everyone, it's Jenny at JC Cards. I'm excited today because I've got two cards to share with you which feature the effects from the new Wow Changes Lightning Effects kit. I'm going to be showing you all three effects that you can get with these changes, and it's the first time I've been using these and they are so much fun. I cannot wait to show you them. So let me give you a quick look at the actual kit and what you get. So in the Wow Changes Lightning Effects kit, you get 6 Wow jars. Only 3 of them are filled with the effects, and I'll show you why in a little bit in the video. So you get 3 effects. The first one is Sheen. That gives you a kind of pearly, almost metaline look. Glisten, which I will take off the top, you can take a quick look at it, is kind of like a glittery, very neutral glitter. And then texture, which is kind of a chunky additive, and these are additives, so what you're going to do is mix them with your existing powders to get different looks. So that's why you get 3 empty jars as well. I highly recommend that you only mix up the amount of powder you're going to need for your card as best as you can guess, or your project. I'm going to be using them today with this Parc Florals Trio. This is the first colour I'm going to be using. This is Hydrangea. All 3 of them are opaque powders and they're a mix of different colours. So Hydrangea is like a pale blue, white and pale red colour. They're all flat, they don't have any effects or glitter in them, so I thought that'd be perfect to use with the Wow Changes. So let me show you what you're going to do. I'm going to be using Glisten for my first card, and I'm going to be using this spoon. You can use any spoon you have as long as you're able to kind of broadly gauge how much powder you're using. You want to use 1 part to 1 part, so 1 part of the changer to an equal size amount of the powder you're mixing it with. So I'm using 2 scoops, I actually only show you 1 there, but I'm going to use 2 scoops of Glisten and 2 scoops of Hydrangea. Add it into one of those empty pots, give it a really good shake. Make sure you keep the lid on, obviously, and then put it off to one side so we can do our stamping. I'm using this background stamp from Darkroom Door. It is called Butterflies Background, and it's nature theme over at Wow this month, so I'm going to be featuring some butterflies and a little bit later on some flowers. I've got a panel of Wow white cardstock here, trimmed to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, and I've did my background stamp, well, sort of let it cling to my craft mat so that it'll stay still. I'm inking it up with my Wow Embossing ink pad and then rubbing this panel of cardstock all over the top of it. I have treated my cardstock with a powder bag to remove any static cling. Now it's really important that you use a metal spoon for doing your mixing. I forgot to mention that earlier. That's to avoid any static getting into the powder. So you may not know, but Wow jars are already treated so that they are not carrying lots of static cling in them. If you use a plastic spoon, a lot of the powder will be stuck to that spoon due to static, and for that reason I recommend using a metal spoon. That's Marian's advice, and I always take Marian's advice. So as you can see, I only created enough of the mix to cover my background. So it's 4 scoops, 2 of the mixer and 2 of the Hydrangea. That means that I have very limited excess left. So what I like to do when I'm coating this entire panel is shake it over half of it, catch it in a coffee filter or some paper, filter it back into the pot, and then shake it out over again. So that way there's very, very little waste. You could, of course, create plenty of mixes using your changes and then keep them, but you'll need probably more than 3 empty jars if that's the case. I like to keep each of my empty jars dedicated to each of the types of changer. And I gave you a quick look at the embossed butterflies there after I'd heated it up with my heat gun, and just looks gorgeous. It lightens the colour of the powder slightly, and that pale blue and the red has gone almost to a kind of a pale rose, with lots of kind of beautiful kind of shimmery glitter throughout. Now I'm going to be adding another mix now. This is Azalea, which is like a deeper red and white from the Parc Floral Trio. I'm doing 2 scoops again of that with 2 scoops of the Sheen, which as I mentioned was a more pearly look to it. Especially on this, when I mixed it with this powder, there's obviously pieces of white in there. So where the white coats, you'll see it a bit later on when I give you a close-up, where the white coats the cardstock and the sheen mixes in with it, it really does look like the pearl powder, the pearlescent powder that you can get. And using this Whimsy Stamps Flower Puffs background stamp, it's these really kind of cool etched florals that completely cover a background. So again, hence why I've used 4 scoops in total. And I'm doing my trick here of shaking it over the top of my embossing ink, catching it in a coffee filter, scooping it back up again, tipping it back into the jar. And if there are any areas where it didn't quite get coated, you can just dab your panel into the coffee filter just to coat it completely. And here's a close look at it. I am trying to get you to see it in the light. It's quite tough. You'll see it in a sec. There you go. You can see that really pretty pearly sheen. And that pearl coats all over the red as well. And it does lighten it up a little bit. Now, to use my background panels, I'm using these nesting frame dies from Altenew. And I'm going to use that largest frame first and die cut out my butterfly panel to start my first card. So I'm going to run it through my die cutting machine, and then what I'm going to do is pop it up onto a £110 white note card that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 tall, and pop it up on foam tape just to get some dimension. I'm going to keep these cards really clean and simple. I just really like the star of the show to be that background shimmer. So I'm using this Thankful 2 die by CZ Designs with Simon Says stamp, and I've die cut it twice because there's 2 different layers, the back layer from some vellum and then the front layer from some pink cardstock, and then I'm going to adhere them together. I'll then pop it up in the center with some foam adhesive, and you can see that pink really matches that kind of rosy, pale rosy color in the shimmery background, whereas before in the hydrangea it was more of a pinky red. To add my sub-sentiment, this is from Tailored Expressions, one of their simple sentiment strips background stamps, die cut with the coordinating die and popped up with a strip of foam tape. And then I'm going to round the corners to match that background die. And I will, off camera, add some enamel dots just to coordinate and add a pop of colour. And that finishes my first card. For my second card, I've used that background die again, and this time I'm going to add some liquid adhesive on the back and then pop it onto a panel of vellum. This is cut to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches, just trimmed down with my paper trimmer. And then I will add my foam tape onto the back, and for that reason, it sandwiches the vellum about a 1/4 inch away, or just 2-3 millimeters away from the panel of cardstock that is my card base. Kind of gives that floating vellum look. It's great for using this technique over pattern paper to kind of tone it down a little bit, or coloured cardstock. I'm only using it over white, so it gives a kind of almost wedding feel, I guess. I'm going to be adding my third wow changer onto this die cut here. So I've die cut this thank you die from Altenew 3 times. I've glued 2 of them together to create almost like a chipboard look, and on this third one I'm going to add my embossing powder. So this time I'm mixing the texture changer with the sunflower powder, which is the bright yellow kind of mix from the Parc Floral trio. Love that colour. It's like pale yellow and bright lemon yellow mixed together. So I'm mixing in 3 scoops of that and 3 scoops of the texture, just because this die cut's quite large and I like to coat my die cuts when I emboss over them twice. So I thought I'd better make sure that I had enough. And then give it a good shake. And then I'm going to dunk that third thank you die into my embossing ink pad and then sprinkle over my mix. And you'll see it was a good job that I did do the 3 scoops of each. It wasn't quite enough. It wouldn't have been quite enough if I just had 4 scoops in total. And then just to make sure I get it fully coated, I flipped it over with my pokey tool and dunked it in a few times. And I did off camera repeat this again after I'd heated it. And I will give you a close-up. So I'm just going to heat it with my heat gun and then give you a close-up look on the camera. You'll see that yellow embossing powder now has some huge chunky texture, and that's exactly what that third changer does. And here's another look with a second layer, super chunky, and when you run your hands over it, it almost feels like sandpaper, but it's still got that nice sheeny gloss. Really cool. And I'm going to add this over the top of my layered thank you that I already had set off to one side with some liquid glue. Pop it under some blocks to dry, and you do need really strong adhesive because inevitably there'll have been some embossing powder heated up on the back of that top layer, and shiny embossing powder can be quite hard to stick, so I recommend really strong liquid adhesive. I use art glitter glue. It's my tried and true tested glue. I've tried many others, and that's my favourite for strong adhering of die cuts. To finish off, I'm going to pop this Tailored Expression sentiment, heat embossed in Wow Metallic Rich Pale Gold, trimmed out and popped up with some enamel dots. And that finishes my second card.
These changes are so much fun. I definitely recommend you try and grab some, and be sure to check out the other tutorials Marianne's got over on the Wow Embossing channel. For me, there's a couple of videos here you might enjoy, and I've got tons of others on my channel if you think about subscribing. Have a wonderful day. Bye.